So here's a really interesting bug. I think I just caught the issue. Oh, yeah, that's naked. So I have this function that will disable movement when it comes up with a collision. And so you can see here it has it doing it on authority, and then it's doing it on the client because it's a replicated call. And so when we look at that, let's see that's right here. Client reliable. So it's sending that information to the client saying, hey, guess what? It's important for you now to disable your collision and your component that replicates your movement. And so what we have here is we have a character that's in this vehicle that has no collision, right? And now I'm going to shoot off, and then again, this is going to accurately call to disable the collision on the client. And this is replicated because again, that vehicle is possessed by the player at the time of being called. So what you're going to see is boom, it comes out. But if I were to jump out of the vehicle, and what I see here is we're going to exit the vehicle, but at this time we're no longer possessing, right? We're now possessed the driver. We've unpossessed the vehicle. And by unpossessing the vehicle, when we now run this client exit driver, it will call it, but it's just going to call it again on the server. So we can just kind of jump through this. We'll see right here, we have this function saying like, hey, run. I have a breakpoint here saying like, hey, have you ever not the client run? But it's gonna disable that. And so we have once it activates on the server, and then it's gonna do it again. Let's remove that, and it again runs it twice on the server. So this is a really good example of looking and being like, hey, why isn't my code not working right? If we go to the ASMR vehicle, we go up to here, we have two functions, exact same setup, right? Client reliable. We're assuming he's going to come through, and because of that, ultimately, this one's not getting sent to the client. So what can we do, right? Well, we could do a few things. One, we could have an on rep and have a state of for instance, having a driver and not a driver. And then on replication, we could update the pawn, or we could ask that the pawn run a command that would basically activate and deactivate its collision, and then have that be replicated on the pawn at the time. But you can see what would be tricky is if this ASMR pawn, right, if it has its collision enabled, right, and then we replicate it in the same way, reliable on the client, and then all of a sudden we were no longer possessing that, then again that function is going to go off on the server twice. It's not actually going to go off on the player. So even if we were to make these reliable, or inside of it had a switch here saying, hey, if you're not authority, let me run the client version of this. So it's an interesting situation to handle here. I think looking at this and looking at the requirements for having something like this happen, it seems like the best way to go about it will be to have an on rep. So basically, all things when like a variable, when it will replicate, it will go ahead and trigger a function when that is replicated to or other actors that are in its zone of information. And we could probably do that right on the ASMR pawn here. So to make that work, to make a character that's moving right, we'll have this little protected variable, we're going to add it. And so we have some mesh, we have some other stuff that's breathing, and so then we're just going to have one more property in here. And I think that's a good place to put it. It's a little weird that's going to be right in the middle here, but I'm just going to put it U property, and then replicated using, and then at this case we're going to give it the name of the function. I'm going to say onRep, and then we're going to say movement enabled. OnRep movement and collision. Control. Right? And now when this bool that is B movement and collision enabled, when this is flipped by just some function that wants to switch it, it's going to go ahead and replicate this on another device. So then what I do here, I'm going to go ahead and make another function. I'm going to make it protected and virtual, so maybe we'll want a little bit different logic in a child one. So right here, this is public, but we're going to go ahead and make a private hidden version. I believe this has to be a U function so that Unreal knows how to use it. Void onRep, and we don't need to give it any variable. We can go ahead and generate that definition, and then if B is B movement and collision is enabled, right? The one that just got updated. If it's enabled, we're going to go ahead and enable movement and collision. Else, we're going to disable movement and collision, right? So that there is going to basically replicate, well, it is going to replicate depending on its distance from other actors using this onRep. Now, the next thing that needs to happen is we need to in here show the there's an onRep kind of function that needs to be called that'll make this work. So I'll have to write that too. I can't really remember it offhand. So this is a really great example where you can use ChatGPT to just kind of help you. So I think I've done this recently, so I can say like onRep. So we're seeing some onRep. Yeah, I'm just going to go down a bunch, and I'm going to find where they specifically go into this, the exact function which I was looking for. It's just the replication setup. So, and also it's equals, and there's no parentheses, it looks like. Now, sometimes ChatGPT will lie to you. But in this case, it's probably a little unlikely. I'm probably in the wrong. So I'm just going to update that. Now it's looking for that. And then I'm just going to go right in here and create this quick little update. It's going to call the parent function. And let's just go back to that ChatGPT and see, yeah, it's this do rep lifetime, and I think I was showing it for the vehicles, so I'm just going to, of course, change this to be the pawn I'm using right now. And I'm not looking to the driver, I'm just saying be movement collision enabled, right? And then you have to include the library that lets you do replication. So this is just saying, hey, if you're going to replicate this object, make sure to also replicate this B movement and collision enabled. upon getting B movement, upon this changing, make sure to call one of these functions, right? And so then that means just on the server now, what we can do is we're going to go ahead and if it has authority, we're going to change this B movement enabled function, but otherwise we're just going to call we're going to go ahead and call that. So if it has authority, in this case right here, so I'm just doing some debugging, what we want to do is B movement and collision enabled, we're going to set that to true, right? And then when we're disabling it, boom, I'm going to set it to false. Cool. So now in the vehicle, right, we can go back here and we're no longer going to need to specifically handle sending this additional information over to the client, because the pawn's going to know, like, hey, I've had my stuff replicated with not being able to use movement or be able to move movement, and I need to handle that on my own. So I'm just going to go ahead and, well, I'm going to click into these real quick just so I can delete them. So it looks like I'm doing something else here. I'm saying like, hey, make sure to set the actor, but I believe that server can actually handle that. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all the client logic there. Don't want it. And I'm just going to go back into here. I'm going to delete these two functions. And then that's going to go ahead and give me some errors here, which are just saying like, hey, look, it used to replicate to the client, no longer needed. Hey, look, you were telling the client, can you do this? And again, that's no longer needed. And I actually don't even need this has authority anymore. That was just kind of proof point. So we have that working out. And often when we do this, let's close that out. I notice that sometimes I have to close down the whole project and rebuild, because that do replication function sometimes just needs to be, when it's first built, it has like a little bit more information about the replication, and sometimes it won't trigger the on rep just if I do a hot load recompile from the editor. So I'll close it down and then open up, and then bam, I'm in this magical place. So what are we looking for? We're looking for the player to exit. It's going to go ahead, grab some more information about the character, say like, hey, look, I'm happy with it. I'm going to tell it to disable its collision or enable its collision when it's in the pod. Upon doing that, it's going to replicate that value and then make sure that the client also enables and disables the collision. So that way we don't have a weird stuttering issue. We'll have a little bit of a stutter because we're not actually, it's not a synchronized action. Versus our movement component is usually synchronized. But in this case, we just want to make sure, so we can see here it has authority and it's getting disabled, and we run it. Now it looks like it did not run. We're not seeing it again getting run on the client. So I just want to, I'm going to go back to this, and this is that property that we're saying, hey, look, make sure to call this. And so I'm just going to go into this and put a little breakpoint here just to see, hey, look, is this ever getting called? I think we're already playing. Otherwise, we can be shooting out. I'm going to jump out just a little bit early. We're trying to set up the driver. Specifically, we want to we're going to want to enable the movement again for the character, right? So jump into it. Yes, it is getting called, and then the on rep is getting called, and then now it's enabled, and so we're going to call it one more time. It is getting called again, and specifically it's getting called to enable the movement collision, right? And that's perfect. Now we have this character and he's just falling in space. Beautiful. That's exactly what we wanted. So to see the whole sequence together, we have our character. We jump in, boom, we're getting this activated. We're going to update the movement. We're going to go fly. Whee! Now we're getting a little bit of jitter. So one thing I'm kind of noticing is it's perhaps I didn't see the disable going off on the client. So we'll kind of look at to see if there's going to be an issue there with the client. So disable happened once. We should see it happen again. We do not. It just shoots down, bam, but it landed, so at least that worked. And we're trying to set up the driver again. We see it once happen on the server. Comes down to this on rep. Again, it would be really nice to see this getting called once. We'll see what's going on here. It looks like just this on rep's not happening. That's probably because I did not set this to false, or more importantly, it may be its default value may be false. So when it first gets this, it's not actually changing the variable, and thus it's never calling the other one. So on start, we should probably make sure this is set to true, because the collision is set to true when it first starts. And we can see this getting disabled here. Okay, so if we just jump back in, oh, I've changed the visuals, but yeah, we see this character, he's running around. I don't know which hotkey. That's the one. And that's me getting back in. I think the controller camera got tilted, so it looks a little weird right now, but looks like our movement is all set up again. So how do we fix that last little issue, right? Where we want to make sure that this is getting set up as start. We can say like on the construction we can do that, but we also can just click on this device, this bool here, put a little bracket or an equal sign, and say, hey look, start is true. So that will be executed right away if I just recompile like this on the fly. It's not on that on rep thing, which I'm not sure if it always does that. I just notice sometimes that doesn't go off, and I try to be fixing a bug that's just, or a value that's not getting replicated. So it's going to do a little recompile. It's going to have a little fun time here. Go ahead. Now all that kind of stuff can in the same way. I believe you can have an onRep function be called in Blueprint. If you guys are curious, I can show off how that is done as well. So we hit play. We have our character, right? Movement is working. We go in, bam. We have the authority. Hey, look, I just want to make sure that you disable the movement. I'm going to unclick it, and then we have our on rep getting called now for disabling the movement, just how we wanted. Boom, movement is getting disabled. I'm just hitting F5, and I have these breakpoints, and so it's jumping to each little breakpoint that it has. And in the future here, I'm going to be removing these print statements. Just kind of have them at the start. So yeah, look, we got a ship flying, nice and smooth. That one's being a little buggy. We can look into what's going on there later. I'm just going to do this little cheat key here to speed up and zoom to the planet. Okay, so we got this. We fly over here. We're above. I can probably shoot down from there. Yeah, there it is. Bam! Hit the key. Okay, look, it's going to enable. I'm going to remove that hotkey. And then, yep, it just ran again on the client. There he goes. Let's open it back up. And, there it is. Got our character running around, working in the world, on the server and the client, both are running accurately. So that's kind of how you have to go around when you're bugging or figuring out the intricacies of working with a client, working with a server, and why maybe some of your functions aren't getting called. Hope you all had a good day.